One of the great sages of the Jewish people from the times of the Mishnah was Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon. Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon lived under Roman rule at a time when Hadrian the emperor went on a vicious and cruel campaign to eradicate Torah and observance of the mitzvahs. Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon was not fazed, and he would continue to publicly lecture in Torah to the masses. The Talmud in Avodah Zarah tells us of a dialogue between Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma and Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon before he was ultimately executed in the most horrific of ways. In the course of that conversation, Rabbi Yossi turned to Rabbi Chananya and said that you are flaunting the laws of the Romans. I would not be surprised if ultimately they burn you together with the Sefer Torah. Indeed, that is exactly what happened at the end of Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon's life. So, in the course of the conversation, Rabbi Chananya turned to Rabbi Yossi and said, what am I into Olam Haba? Do I have a share in the world to come? The question is very strange. Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon was a great sage, a tzaddik, a righteous person, and he would publicly teach Torah with tremendous mesiras nefesh, putting his life on the line and ultimately giving up his life for the Torah. So why was he questioning whether he will merit to go to Olam Haba or not? Perhaps even more perplexing is the response of Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Rabbi Yossi responds, Kul ma'aseh bali yadcha, is there no single deed that you can think of that you may have done that will assure you that you have a portion in the world to come? How was this a response? He should have said, of course you have a portion in Olam Haba. You are a great sage. You are a great and righteous individual who risks his life to teach Torah to the Jewish people. But he did not say that. He said, perhaps there is one deed that may redeem you, and through that you will have a share in the world to come. Rabbi Chananya answered that yes, I once inadvertently switched my Purim money, the matanos le'evyonim, the money which was collected to be distributed to the poor on the festival of Purim, became mixed up with my own personal funds. Instead of availing myself to other options, such as taking out a proportion of the money and giving it to the poor, instead I gave everything over to the poor. If so, said Rabbi Yossi, that will be the redeeming mitzvah with which you will merit Olam Haba. So what's going on? It's a very, very puzzling story. The Alter Rebbe in Parshas Toldos in Torah gives us a deeper insight into the conversation. You see, people have different natures, and those natures drive the pursuits that we engage in and what we enjoy. Someone who enjoys study has a nature which is a little bit more contracted, a little bit more focused. They're able to sit and they're able to study, and they're able to enjoy the study and pursuit of wisdom beyond any other delight that may exist within the world. Not only that, but their love of learning, their love of wisdom is so great that they too may be willing to give up all of the pleasure of the world and even their life for the pursuit of wisdom, as we find by many of the great philosophers throughout history. For a Jew, the expression of this desire for wisdom and learning is through the study of Torah. Then, you have some people who have a different type of nature. Instead of their nature being one of marash chayra, being one which is more focused, more diligent, more contracted, they have a disposition which is more joyous, more outgoing. And that type of personality has a more difficult time studying because it doesn't come easily by their nature. This was the dialogue between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon. Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon knew full well that he had spent his entire life learning Torah and enjoying and loving its wisdom. And not only that, but he was risking his life to teach Torah to others. Yet, he was not sure whether that was sufficient to warrant him Olam Haba, because only if his actions were purely and solely for the sake of Hashem, not tainted or tinged by his own gravitations, by his own nature, by his own drives, only then would he be assured that he had a perfect service of God and would merit Olam Haba. And therefore he questioned, perhaps my devotion to Torah study, my devotion to teaching Torah, am I willing to risk my life for Torah, is because that is my nature. Because that's how I was born. I was born with such a drive, with such a motivation, and such an inclination to be involved in the study of intellectual pursuits. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma said, perhaps you've got one redeeming deed. Perhaps you could think of one action that you did that transcended your nature, and through that will evidence that your entire avodas Hashem, including your Torah study, was not because of ulterior motives, not because of your nature, not because that is what is intuitive and what is natural to you, but rather because you are doing it selflessly for Hashem's sake. And the answer was that he once took the money that was mixed in, his Purim money, into his regular funds, and he distributed it all to the poor. Generosity comes from a nature of someone who is outgoing, someone who is just giving, someone who is uncontrolled. Whereas someone who tends to be more focused, more controlled, more inhibited, is going to tend to be more miserly. With that action of squandering all of his money and giving it to the poor, Rabbi Chananya ben Tradyon showed that he was able to transcend his nature. And that shows that everything that he did in the service of Hashem was not because he was defined or limited by the nature that he was born with, but because he selflessly gave up of himself and dedicated himself to do the will, the ratzon of Hashem. Our midos, our emotions, can be instinctive. They can be things that we are born with. And therefore, all of our midos are subject to an aspect or dimension of self-serving. The ultimate objective is that we transcend that nature. We tap into the deeper qualities of the neshama and surrender ourselves to do what Hashem wants. Not because it's necessarily easy, not because it's compatible with our nature, but because we are willing to surrender ourselves and give ourselves over to do what Hashem wants and not what our nature dictates.